picture this. It's 2017, and an urban farming commune in Portland, Oregon decides they're going to, like, completely revolutionize agriculture.
Oh, boy.
Right. So they've decided that the traditional structure of a chicken flock is just too hierarchical, it's too aggressive, too patriarchal.
Right, according to their framework.
Exactly. So they implement what they literally call egalitarian rooster governance. I mean, they take 3 alpha roosters, put them into one single flattened hierarchy flock, and they just expect them to share power.
Like a committee.
Yeah, to form consensus and live in harmony. And I want you, listening right now, to guess exactly what happened next.
Well, biological reality tends to aggressively assert itself when we try to ignore it, so it was a bloodbath.
It was an absolute bloodbath. 17 brutal, bloody fights in a single week. Just feathers everywhere.
Wow.
And the hens were so stressed by this constant turf war and the lack of clear leadership that their egg production plummeted by a staggering 60%.
I mean, that's a massive drop.
Huge. The commune ultimately had to separate them, basically quietly admitting defeat to nature.
It's a perfect, almost comedic illustration of a very serious premise. You know, you can construct whatever social theories you want in a classroom, but when you step into the barnyard, nature demands order. And it usually demands a strict hierarchy.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Now, before we get into the meat of this incredible story, do us a massive favor, hit that like and subscribe button right now to support the show.
And it really helps us out.
It does. It helps us bring these massive, in-depth breakdowns straight to you. Because today, our Mädchen is reviewing a highly provocative, completely paradigm-shifting new ebook. It's called Are You Chicken? Roosters Will Rule the Roost in Recreating Western Civilization by Conrad Riker.
Quite a title.
It is. And let me tell you, if you are looking for a read that just aggressively challenges modern institutional norms, redefines self-reliance, and strips away the modern comforts we all take for granted, you absolutely must buy this book.
Yeah, it's an intense read.
Check Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to get your copy, and make sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack.
And we should note it is a text that pulls 0 punches.
It really doesn't. Our goal for this deep dive is to completely unpack Riker's manifesto. I mean, this is a book custom written for men's rights activists and red-pilled men in the manosphere.
Right.
Riker uses the literal and metaphorical act of raising backyard roosters to explain how our modern institutions, from HR departments to urban planning, have, in his view, been captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies.
And more importantly for his specific audience, it acts as a blueprint for how men can reclaim their personal and physical sovereignty.
Yes, exactly.
But before we dive into the deep end of the text, let's quickly establish the ground rules for you, our listener.
Good idea.
The text we are exploring today contains some highly charged political, social, and cultural arguments. Our mission in this deep dive is not to endorse the author's viewpoints, nor is it to condemn them.
Right, we're totally neutral here.
Exactly. We are here as your guides to impartially map out Riker's arguments, to understand his appeal to his audience, and to extract the genuinely fascinating historical and biological data he uses to construct his worldview. We are analyzing this objectively.
Okay, let's unpack this, because Riker doesn't start with institutions. He actually starts in the bedroom.
He does?
He begins the book with this massive wake-up call, contrasting the biological rhythm of the rooster with the digital addiction of the modern man. And he cites this really fascinating 2013 Nagoya University study about rooster crowing.
Oh, that study is foundational to his whole argument.
Right, because for a long time, people just thought roosters crowed because they saw the sun come up. But this study proved it's entirely internal, didn't it?
Yeah, the methodology of that Nagoya study is vital to Riker's point. The researchers actually took roosters and placed them in environments with constant, dim artificial light. So no sunrise, no sunset, no external cues whatsoever.
Just constant dim light.
Exactly. And yet, the roosters consistently crowed right before the anticipated dawn. They prove that the crowing is dictated by an internal circadian DNA clock. It's hardwired. Riker frames it as an inescapable biological metronome.
And then Riker aggressively contrasts that hardwired biological certainty with what modern men are doing today. He points out a statistic that 73% of American men reach for their smartphone before they even put on their pants in the morning.
It's a striking image.
It is. And he tells this anecdote about a startup founder in Austin who wakes up and immediately opens TikTok before he even brushes his teeth, just to see what the algorithm wants him to care about that day.
Well, what Riker's doing there is introducing his concept of, he calls it, chronoandrocentrism.
Chronoandrocentrism, that is a heavy term.
It's a mouthful, but he breaks it down clearly for his readers.
Yeah.
He argues that historically, male-driven time was anchored entirely to the dawn. Think about the military muster, or the Roman exensili, the reserve infantry, who physically blew horns at dawn to wait the legion, or even the factory whistle of the Industrial Revolution. The day started with a definitive physical declaration of action.
But now he says we suffer from what he labels nocturnalization.
Nocturnalization, yeah. Staying up late, bathed in screen light, scrolling endlessly. And Riker explicitly frames this in his book as a feminine nesting behavior.
Okay, wait, I want to push back on that framing a bit, or at least, understand it better from his perspective. Calling scrolling and nesting behavior feels like a very deliberate provocation for his audience.
Oh, it absolutely is meant to be provocative. He argues that staying up late to optimize comfort, curating a digital space, and just consuming content is the direct antithesis of the historical male drive to wake early and prepare for external physical action.
But he backs it up with some hard biology too, right? Regarding what that screen time actually does to the male body, like it's not just a philosophical critique, he says it's physiological sabotage.
He does. He pulls in 2018 data from Harvard Health demonstrating the specific mechanisms of blue light exposure. When you stare at a phone screen at 11 p.m., the specific wavelength of that blue light tricks the pineal gland into thinking it's still daytime.
Right, which messes with your sleep.
It suppresses melatonin production by up to 50%. And here's why Riker zeroes in on that for his specific red-pilled audience pixels. Testosterone production in men is deeply tied to REM sleep cycles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by suppressing melatonin and disrupting deep sleep, he argues you are literally blunting the morning testosterone spike that men naturally experience.
So he's framing the smartphone almost as like a chemical castration device.
A behavioral modification device, or as he calls it, a digital cattle prod.
A digital cattle prod.
Right. His underlying premise is that the algorithms running our devices are designed to reward passivity, emotional compliance, and consumption. You don't build anything while scrolling. You don't defend anything. You just consume.
So you're just a passive observer.
Exactly. He compares this to the Maasai warriors in Kenya, who wake before the sun to physically guard their cattle from lions. Or Frederick the Great of Prussia, who mandated early rising because he believed willpower is a finite resource that peaks at dawn.
So Riker's argument is that functional civilizations depend on men who show up before the crisis happens.
Not men who hit snooze until the crisis arrives at their front door, yes.
So for you listening, what does this all mean? Riker paints this picture where we've basically traded the sword for the snooze button, but I have to ask, does waking up early really translate to institutional power? Does just getting out of bed and putting your phone down actually change the system?
That is the exact bridging question Riker anticipates from his readers. Waking up is merely the prerequisite. It's the biological reset.
Okay.
But once a man is awake, his next immediate challenge is how he organizes himself alongside other men. And that transition brings us to the core of Riker's worldview, which is his unapologetic, highly controversial defense of dominance hierarchies.
Right, the pecking order. I always thought pecking order was just a corporate buzzword people threw around. But Riker points out it's a literal, scientifically observed biological phenomenon.
It is.
He brings up Thorleif Skjelderup Ebbe, this Norwegian zoologist who discovered it in chickens way back in 1921.
Yes, Skjelderup. He observed that a flock of chickens isn't a democracy. It is a strictly structured linear hierarchy.
Linear meaning?
Meaning chicken A can peck chicken B, and chicken B can peck chicken C, and so on. But chicken C cannot peck chicken A. It is rigid. And Riker uses this biological reality to launch his most significant critique against modern corporate and educational institutions.
Right. He argues that these institutions, the modern HR departments, the universities, have been completely captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies that are obsessed with artificially flattening these natural hierarchies.
He's talking about things like diversity committees and empathy circles.
Yeah, empathy circles where everyone is supposed to be a co-leader and there's no clear boss.
Riker views these egalitarian frameworks not as progress, but as a dangerous systemic rejection of natural order. He posits that nature doesn't do consensus, and nature certainly doesn't do safe spaces.
It just doesn't exist in the wild.
Right. To a rooster, hierarchy isn't about oppression, it's about order, efficiency, and protection. If the flock is constantly debating who is in charge, a predator will wipe them out while they're having a meeting.
That perfectly explains why he includes that wild case study from the Google office in Zurich.
Oh, the flat leadership experiment.
Yeah. They apparently tried this experiment, no managers, total egalitarianism among the software engineers. And what happened? Riker notes that the engineers reported massively higher anxiety levels.
Well, because when no one is officially in charge, you don't actually have equality.
Exactly. You just have this invisible, manipulative power struggle where no one knows the actual rules. It's all subtext.
Precisely. Ambiguity in leadership breeds anxiety. Riker also cites a really fascinating piece of legislation to back this up. EU Directive 2022-891.
What was that one about?
This was a mandate that banned the culling of male chicks, driven by animal welfare and compassionate egalitarian ideals. But Riker explains the mechanism of what actually happened on the ground.
Right, the unintended consequences.
Because farms were forced to keep massive populations of male birds without the physical space for them to establish natural territories and hierarchies, it led to extreme overcrowding and brutal infighting.
So the compassion backfired.
This compassionate mandate paradoxically resulted in a 22% increase in flock mortality.
Wow. And this leads right into a trend Riker calls cockerel cancellation.
Yes.
He points out that 4-H programs in local schools are actively removing roosters from agricultural programs because the birds are being viewed as like symbols of aggression, or what society now labels toxic masculinity.
He sees it as a direct parallel.
Definitely. And there's this unbelievable story in the book about a student housing co-op in Berkeley. They literally voted to evict their live rooster for aggressive crowing.
I remember this.
And they replaced it with a Bluetooth speaker. A speaker that played recorded, volume-controlled crows at pre-approved times.
It's almost too perfect of a metaphor.
Right. And the result, the hens, lacking a physical protector, got so stressed by the lack of a real rooster that their egg production dropped by half.
Which perfectly encapsulates Riker's thesis for his red-pilled audience. He asserts that cockerel cancellation isn't really about birds at all. It's a proxy war against innate male assertiveness.
He really zeroes in on that.
The author believes that by pathologizing the natural traits of the rooster, the vigilance, the territorial dominance, the vocal assertiveness society is actively trying to silence male leadership. He argues that when institutions try to erase hierarchy, they just create a vacuum that sociopathic predators exploit.
But if natural hierarchy is the social software that governs us, the physical structures men build are the hardware.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, Riker makes it very clear that you can't just adopt a dominant mindset. You have to physically manifest it in the real world. Which brings us to the forge of character, as he calls it, the coop, the soil, and the feed.
This is where Riker transitions from his social critique to physical instruction. He frames the act of building a predator-proof coop, and he specifically outlines this detailed 10x12 plan in the book as a reclamation of male spatial authority. He is demanding that men physically alter the landscape.
And he draws this hilarious, but honestly pretty biting contrast between building a secure, storm-proof coop from scratch versus assembling IKEA furniture. I love this part of the book.
The IKEA comparison is very sharp.
He claims modern flat-pack furniture is practically designed to make men feel inept. You know, you're sitting on the floor with a tiny Allen wrench, staring at cryptic, wordless instructions, building something out of particle board that will probably break in 2 years.
Riker views that as a direct metaphor for the modern male condition. Cheap, easily broken, and completely reliant on an opaque, foreign system.
Yeah, it's totally foreign.
He champions what he terms the coop mindset, and did do it daily. He cites Pew Research, noting that a staggeringly low 2% of American men actually build a physical structure with their hands annually.
2%? That's crazy.
He argues that manual labor isn't just a chore, it is a neurological necessity for men.
Okay, wait, a neurological necessity. How does swinging a hammer actually change your brain chemistry? I mean, what's his argument there?
Riker points to a study published in JAMA Psychiatry looking at combat veterans who engaged in building and agriculture, specifically building coops and working with soil. The mechanism at play here is proprioception and bilateral stimulation.
Proprioception, meaning knowing where your body is in space.
Exactly. The rhythmic, purposeful act of measuring wood, cutting it, smelling the sawdust, and physically hammering nails forces the hypervigilant brain to anchor itself in the present physical reality.
Oh, so it grounds you.
Riker argues that building a structure that protects life resets the male nervous system in a way that just sitting in a sterile room doing talk therapy simply cannot.
That actually makes total sense. He's saying action precedes healing. But he doesn't stop at just building the physical structure. Riker goes incredibly deep into what he calls food and soil sovereignty.
Yes, the feed.
Right. He unleashes this massive, sweeping critique of the 1973 Farm Bill and programs like WIC. For you listening who might not be familiar with agricultural history, what exactly did the 1973 Farm Bill do that makes Riker so incredibly angry?
The 1973 Farm Bill, which was orchestrated by then Secretary of Agriculture Earl Butz, fundamentally changed American farming. Before that bill, government policy often paid farmers to keep land idle to stabilize prices and preserve soil.
Okay.
The 1973 bill shifted the entire paradigm to maximum yield. The motto was get big or get out. It massively subsidized commodity crops, specifically corn and soy.
Which is in everything now.
Exactly. Riker's argument is that this legislation flooded the market with cheap, processed high-fructose corn syrup and soy derivatives, completely altering the base calories of the American diet.
And Riker argues this created a dependent, metabolically castrated underclass. Those are his words. He says men are being fed on industrial sludge instead of real, vital nutrients. So his solution is total food independence. He introduces the 3-crop code.
Yes, the 3-crop code. He relates this to the Stoic triad of agriculture: corn, sunflower, and alfalfa.
Why those 3 specifically?
Riker explains the brilliant biological mechanism here. Corn provides dense carbohydrate energy. Sunflower provides heavy fats and protein. But both of those crops heavily deplete the soil.
So you need something to restore it.
Right, so you introduce alfalfa, which is a legume that literally pulls nitrogen out of the atmosphere and fixes it into the soil through its root nodules, renewing the earth. Riker maps this onto the Stoic philosophy of body, mind, and spirit. It's a self-sustaining loop.
It's a complete rejection of corporate agriculture. You grow the corn feeds the chicken lays the egg feeds your child. You have effectively seceded from the grocery store.
Total independence.
But he takes it even further into waste management, using a phrase that really caught my eye: sewer socialism.
Yes, sewer socialism.
Can you break down what he means by that? Why is a book about roosters so focused on where our waste goes?
Riker traces modern sanitation back to the 1858 London Basalt jet sewers. These were built to flush human and animal waste out into the Thames to stop cholera outbreaks.
Which, makes sense for a crowded city.
While historically necessary for disease control in overcrowded cities, Riker argues that the modern iteration of this, flushing every ounce of organic matter into municipal, state-controlled treatment plants, is a massive surrender of sovereignty.
He critiques modern environmentalism for this, right? He calls it gynocentric environmentalism, which he says prefers everything to be sanitized, flushed away, and just out of sight.
Correct. Riker argues that true masculinity involves managing the mess. He views manure and waste not as garbage, but as alchemy.
Alchemy. Turning waste into gold.
Exactly. In the natural order, chicken manure is incredibly rich in nitrogen, but it's hot, meaning it will burn plants if you apply it directly to the soil.
Oh, interesting.
A sovereign man, Riker argues, takes that raw, dangerous material, composts it with carbon-like wood chips, and through the intense heat of bacterial breakdown, turns it into the black gold that fuels the 3-crop code.
So sewer socialism is his critique of a society that happily pays the state a monthly utility fee to take away its most valuable fertilizer.
Precisely. Keeping the populace dependent on buying synthetic fertilizers from megacorporations instead of creating their own.
All right, so you've built the 10 by 12 coop, you've mastered the 3-crop code, you're composting and turning waste into value. But Riker argues all of that physical infrastructure is completely meaningless if you're not willing to defend it.
Willingness to commit violence to protect the flock.
Yes, and that brings us to Section 4, the Sentinel. This might be the most aggressive part of the book, his views on courage, predators, and the law.
It is certainly where his rhetoric peaks. Riker dives deep into the specific evolutionary biology of the rooster to define what a sentinel actually is.
Give me some of those stats, because they are wild.
A rooster has 360-degree monocular vision. Because their eyes are on the sides of their head, they can process visual information at 75 frames per second.
Which is way faster than a human.
Far faster. Furthermore, their neural pathways allow them to initiate an alarm call in just 0.8 seconds after detecting a shadow of a hawk.
Less than a second to spot a threat and warn everyone. And he brings up this concept of nociceptor density in their legs. What exactly does that mean, and why does Riker care so much about a bird's legs?
Nociceptors are the sensory nerve endings that send pain signals to the brain. Roosters have an incredibly dense concentration of these receptors in their scaly legs.
Okay.
Biologically, this means when a raccoon or a fox bites a rooster's leg, the bird feels an agonizing, intense level of pain, arguably far more than a hen would feel.
So they are highly sensitive to pain.
Yes. But here is Riker's philosophical takeaway. The rooster's brain is hardwired to override the natural withdrawal reflex. Instead of fleeing the pain, the rooster attacks the source of it to protect the flock behind him.
Wow. Feeling the pain intensely but enduring it to strike back. That is, Riker uses that biological reality to define true courage for modern men. He references Thomas Aquinas here, right?
He does. He points out that courage is not the absence of fear or pain. It is disciplined aggression in the face of it, assessing a threat, signaling your presence, and striking.
And to implement this disciplined aggression, Riker introduces the Praxa 3-tool rule. He dictates that every sovereign man must physically master 3 basic implements: the shovel, the axe, and the hammer.
The holy trinity of tools for him.
Yeah. And he leans heavily on a story he calls the Dunleavy Principle.
The Dunleavy story is central to his argument about mental health.
Oh, this story is wild. It's about this suburban guy named Dunleavy who is severely depressed, going to years of therapy, taking SSRIs, just feeling completely adrift in the modern world. Then one night, a pack of raccoons attacks his backyard coop.
A real physical crisis.
Right. Dunleavy runs out in his underwear with a standard garden shovel and physically fights off these raccoons in the mud, beating them back to save his birds.
Yeah.
Riker claims this singular violent act of defense cured the man's modern malaise instantly.
Riker argues that Dunleavy's depression was actually a symptom of suppressed biological utility.
Suppressed utility.
Yes. Once Dunleavy acted as a protector, once he successfully executed the law of the shovel, as Riker calls it, his brain chemistry aligned with his evolutionary purpose. The author believes that modern society pathologizes the very vigilance and capacity for violence that built civilization in the first place.
Which brings us to his massive critique of the modern legal system. Riker argues that family courts, Title IX tribunals on college campuses, and just the general legal apparatus operate entirely on a feminist framework.
He claims these bureaucracies treat men as default abusers.
Yeah, stripping away their presumption of innocence and just bogging them down in endless paperwork and emotional reasoning.
He sharply contrasts that bureaucratic nightmare with what he calls rooster law.
Rooster law. Fast, brutal, simple.
In the flock, justice is immediate. There are no appeals, there are no diversity statements, no HR investigations. There is an offense, an immediate physical consequence, and then a return to order. He uses the story of James Kessler to illustrate this.
Right, Kessler was a guy who got dragged through a supposedly corrupt family court system, ultimately being ordered to pay years of child support for a child that DNA proved wasn't even his.
The bureaucracy didn't care about the biological truth.
Exactly, it only cared about the procedure and the paperwork. So Kessler just walked away. He abandoned the system, moved off-grid, and started raising roosters, embracing a life where cause and effect actually made logical sense to him.
Riker uses Kessler to ask his audience a fundamental question. Why submit to a system that hates your nature? He points to incredible historical and modern examples of how raw, unvarnished nature is superior to our sanitized systems.
Like the IDF story.
Right. He details how the IDF has used roosters as early warning systems in kibbutzim near the Gaza border. Technology, sensors, cameras, they can all fail or be hacked. But a rooster will always detect movement in the tall grass.
And the story of the Ukrainian farmer, this blew my mind. During the early days of the conflict, this farmer realized his roosters were consistently sounding alarm calls exactly 90 seconds before Iranian-made Shahed kamikaze drones struck the area. How is that physically possible?
It comes down to acoustic pressure. The Shahed drones emit a very specific low-frequency hum. Human ears cannot detect the subtle atmospheric pressure changes of that frequency until the drone is almost overhead.
But the roosters can.
The avian ear structure of the rooster is highly sensitive to barometric and acoustic shifts. They literally felt the pressure wave of the incoming weapon before human radar operators processed it.
That is incredible.
Riker uses this to argue that innate biological threat detection is an infallible system, and it's the exact system modern men have been trained to suppress in themselves.
Okay, I have to jump in here. Riker is viciously critical of the justice system, and he idolizes this immediate, brutal law of the coup. But practically speaking, how does he expect modern men to apply barnyard justice to a society governed by incredibly complex laws? He can't seriously be advocating for guys to start settling contract disputes with shovels, right?
That is a crucial distinction to make. Riker doesn't expect the state to adopt rooster law, nor does he advocate for random anarchy in the streets. Riker's solution is for men to build parallel systems of competence.
Parallel competence.
He advocates for mastering the elements that the state currently uses to regulate and control populations. If you control your own survival, the state's oversight becomes irrelevant to you. And this transitions us perfectly into Section 5, mastering the elements, specifically fire, winter, and water.
Yes, Section 5. Let's talk about fire, or what Riker creatively calls pyroandria.
Pyroandria, yes.
He drops a statistic that 62% of modern adult men have never built a fire from scratch without lighter fluid. And he views modern municipal regulations, like Portland's Ordinance 18742, which strictly banned backyard wood fires to control air quality as a form of soft castration.
What's fascinating here is the author's deeply philosophical argument. He states that a real fire is a living element. It demands respect, constant presence, and physical manipulation of fuel and oxygen.
You can't just turn it on and walk away.
Exactly. It forces a man to pay attention. He contrasts this with modern conveniences. A microwave or a central heating thermostat doesn't demand respect. It merely demands submission to the power grid.
He argues that comfort is the absolute enemy of civilization. By outsourcing our heat, our water, and our food to state-regulated utilities, men have surrendered their leverage.
Exactly. When discussing winter, which he dramatically calls the trial of endurance, Riker contrasts the modern man who panics when the thermostat drops to 40 degrees Fahrenheit with Amish farmers who routinely manage complex agricultural coops at 32 degrees below zero.
It's a totally different baseline for comfort.
He juxtaposes the mechanical, brutal precision of Ernest Shackleton's Antarctic expedition, where men survived on sheer will and competence, with modern Ivy League university dorms that are cranked to 78 degrees in December so students feel emotionally safe.
I have to bring up the story of the Detroit mechanic from the book because this is the ultimate parallel competence flex. There was a massive winter blackout in Detroit. The grid goes down, freezing temperatures everywhere.
Right.
This guy had a clutch of expensive eggs incubating that were going to die without heat. He didn't sit around waiting for the government to fix the power lines. He went to his garage, fired up a rusted Ford Pinto engine block, and rigged it so the residual heat from the cast iron block acted as a massive thermal battery.
This is ingenious.
He perfectly maintained the 99.5 degrees needed to hatch the chicks using a car engine. He literally hacked thermodynamics.
That anecdote is the perfect embodiment of Riker's parallel competence. The state failed, so the sovereign man imposed his own order on the elements, and Riker extends this exact same philosophy to water.
Right, hydraulic sovereignty.
He advocates for rainwater harvesting as a form of hydraulic sovereignty.
And he gets into the actual mechanics of this too. He talks about installing first flush diverters.
A very specific piece of tech.
For anyone who hasn't built a rainwater catchment system, a first flush diverter is this brilliant mechanical trap. It's usually a PVC pipe with a floating ball valve inside. When it first starts raining, the water washes all the bird poop and dirt off your roof.
Right, you don't want to drink that.
No. So that dirty water goes into this specific trap pipe. Once the pipe fills up, the flowing ball rises and plugs the hole, sealing off the dirty water and allowing only the purely clean rainwater to flow horizontally into your main drinking cistern.
What's fascinating here is that Riker views mastering mechanisms like the first flush diverter as bypassing failing municipal utilities entirely. He references the catastrophic water crisis in Flint, Michigan, as proof that relying on the state for water is a fool's errand.
You just can't trust them.
He invokes the principle of the 1866 Mining Act. Use it or lose it. You must lay claim to your resources.
What's fascinating is how he views the pushback against this. Take the story of Chad Whitaker, who used the obscure Idaho right to heat law to legally beat his homeowners association when they tried to fine him for building a stone fire pit in his yard.
The HOA tried to stop him from burning wood.
Yeah. It really forces you, the listener, to look around and realize how heavily regulated your most basic ancient survival skills have become. Have we traded our fundamental self-reliance for the convenience of a centralized system?
Riker would say yes, overwhelmingly. He argues that feminized urban planning sanitizes risk out of existence. According to the author, modern infrastructure literally replaces rugged trails with paved sidewalks and requires crosswalks instead of teaching spatial awareness and courage.
It makes us soft.
It is an environment designed by and for people who want zero physical risk, which fundamentally alienates the masculine drive to overcome environmental challenges.
And if the state is willing to regulate the rainwater hitting your roof and the fire in your backyard, it's obviously going to regulate how you communicate and how you do business. Which brings us right into Section 6, institutional capture, focusing on the silencing of speech and markets.
This is where Riker connects his agricultural metaphors back to the white-collar world. He cites data showing that 78% of EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, workplace complaints are filed by women.
Okay.
Riker doesn't view this as a sign of progress in workplace safety. Rather, he describes modern HR departments as pink-collar prisons.
Pink-collar prisons. He argues that HR uses emotional reasoning to suppress male speech. He uses the Greek term parrhesia, which translates to fearless, unapologetic, truthful speech.
The kind of speech you'd hear at a job site, not a boardroom.
Right. Riker claims HR departments operate like a farmer who decides to grow a monoculture crop. By trying to sanitize the office environment and remove all the weeds, which Riker defines as natural male assertiveness, blunt logic, and territoriality, HR has actually created an incredibly fragile ecosystem.
Because a monoculture is vulnerable.
Exactly. In a monoculture, one single disease wipes out the whole crop. In corporate America, one single interpersonal conflict or perceived microaggression derails the whole company.
That is an excellent analogy for his argument. Riker asserts that feminist and Marxist ideologies have successfully replaced clear, merit and logic-based hierarchies with emotion-driven regulatory bureaucracies.
He brings up that Boeing mechanic, right?
Yes, he cites the chilling example of a Boeing mechanic with 20 years of experience who was suspended and ultimately replaced by an AI diagnostic checklist simply for telling his junior team to man up during a high-stakes safety drill.
Fired for saying man up. And Riker points fingers at the literature fueling this. He claims that corporate tools like Robin DiAngelo's white fragility and the rejection of innate biology seen in Steven Pinker's blank slate are weaponized.
Weaponized how?
They are used to completely reframe natural male behavior as inherently toxic and oppressive.
It is a deliberate reframing of reality, according to Riker. And this ideological capture doesn't stop at speech. It bleeds directly into the economy. Riker spends a significant portion of the book dissecting the FDA's egg safety rule, specifically 21 CFR 118.
Oh, I loved this part because it exposes the mechanics of bureaucracy. On paper, 21 CFR 118 is about preventing salmonella.
Right, public health.
But Riker argues it's not a health measure at all. He explains how the complex refrigeration and testing mandates are so financially burdensome that a guy with 50 chickens in his backyard cannot legally comply. Riker views this regulation as a weapon lobbied for by the United Egg Producers Cartel to crush independent sovereign men and maintain a corporate monopoly.
Exactly. The regulations favor massive corporate cartels over individual autonomy. But Riker highlights the grassroots resistance to this.
The redneck gold.
Yes. He profiles men like Dale Klein, who sells what he calls redneck gold untaxed, unpasteurized, pasture-raised eggs, operating entirely under the radar using state cottage food laws. Riker describes the rise of underground coop guilds, networks of men trading resources outside the matrix of government taxation and control.
He calls this market alphadom. It's not about competing on price at Walmart. It's about competing on presence, trust, and physical reality. Treating the sale of a dozen eggs or a cord of wood as a sacred handshake agreement between two sovereign individuals entirely outside the purview of the FDA or the IRS.
Riker argues that the mainstream market has been captured by a gynocentric ideology that values regulatory compliance over actual competence and quality. Market alphadom is the rejection of the barcode in favor of the handshake.
But this raises a huge question. If the author genuinely believes the system is this thoroughly captured, if HR, the family courts, the FDA, and even the people designing the sidewalks are all operating on this anti-male framework, what is his ultimate solution? I mean, does he expect his readers to form a political party, vote differently, lobby Congress?
And this is where Riker surprises a lot of readers. His solution is definitively not political in the traditional sense. He explicitly tells his audience that you cannot vote your way out of biological reality.
So no petitions.
No. His solution is entirely local, entirely physical, and deeply immediate. It is a return to brotherhood, the flock, and ultimately a connection to a divine natural order.
Which brings us to the final section of the book, The Great Return. Riker shifts from the solitary sovereign man to the concept of the flock. He cites Jonathan Haidt's evolutionary psychology theory of the hive switch.
Haidt's theory posits that humans have an evolutionary switch that allows them to transcend self-interest and bond deeply as a group. but it must be triggered by specific conditions.
Right.
Riker argues that for men, this high switch is only flipped through shared physical risk and grueling manual labor. It is absolutely not triggered by HR-mandated trust falls or corporate retreats.
Riker describes these underground gatherings he calls praxa. It's groups of men getting together to build these 10 by 12 coops, felling trees, processing animals, and practicing that parrhesia, speaking loudly, truthfully, without a filter, knowing they won't be canceled or reported to HR.
It sounds like a primal reset for them.
It is. And in this final section, the author elevates the rooster from mere agricultural poultry to a profound, almost mystical archetype. The rooster becomes the ultimate biological metronome of truth.
He uses the biblical story of Peter's denial of Jesus to illustrate this. When Peter denies knowing Jesus 3 times, the rooster crows. Riker argues that this wasn't just a convenient literary device or a coincidence.
It was functional.
Yes. In the ancient world, the rooster was the biological lie detector. It was the undeniable voice of nature piercing through human deception and cowardice, a literal call to wake up to the truth.
The author contrasts how different cultures respect this natural law. He points to Edo-era Japan, where roosters were revered. The Japanese actually bred specific birds called shinkidokai, or nervous clocks,
Because they recognized the bird's intricate, unyielding tie to the Earth's rotation and atmospheric changes, they honored the natural rhythm.
and he viciously contrasts that deep respect with modern Germany's 1972 Clean Noise Act, a piece of legislation that literally banned roosters from crowing before 7 a.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. on weekends, purely to protect the uninterrupted sleep of urbanites.
A government writing a law telling nature when it is allowed to wake up.
Exactly. Riker points to the massive surge in backyard farming, over 1.2 million new backyard flocks established recently, not as a cute lockdown hobby, but as what he calls the Great Return. He positions this physical return to the soil in direct hostile opposition to the World Economic Forum's top-down digital Great Reset.
Riker is stating that the rooster is the ultimate symbol of unapologetic truth. You cannot legislate away nature. The natural law, represented by the dominance of the pecking order and the unyielding dawn crow, will always inevitably reassert itself the moment our artificial bureaucratic systems crack.
I just have to linger on one final cinematic story he includes right at the end of the book. It's from a 1987 armed robbery case in Amarillo, Texas.
Oh, this is a great story.
The defense attorney had this airtight, perfectly constructed alibi for the criminal, complete with falsified time cards and witness statements. It was a masterpiece of human deception. But it fell entirely apart in court for one reason: an audio recording of a neighbor's rooster crowing in the background of a phone call.
Because they knew the exact biological consistency of that specific breed's crowing rhythm.
Exactly. They pinpointed the exact time the call was made, destroying the fake alibi. A bird's biological clock defeated $1 million legal defense. Nature's reliability triumphed over human lies.
And that encapsulates the entire philosophy. Riker argues that the concrete of modern civilization is thin, and the biological imperatives beneath it are ancient, massive, and entirely undefeated.
What an intense, completely paradigm-shifting journey through Riker's worldview. We've gone from the biological dangers of staring at a glowing screen to the neurological necessity of building predator-proof coops with a hammer and nails.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We've unpacked the mechanisms of the 3-crop code, explored the fierce courage of the rooster fighting off a raccoon, and pushed back against the suffocating bureaucracies of HR departments and municipal water regulations. It's a total, unyielding reimagining of modern manhood through the harsh, clarifying lens of agriculture and natural law.
As we wrap up this analysis, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over based on Riker's assertions. If the natural biological drives of men, the drive for hierarchy, the capacity for disciplined aggression, the need to build and protect, are truly as undeniable and hardwired as the rooster's internal circadian clock, well, what happens to a civilization that continually tries to pave over those instincts with legislation, sensitivity training, and digital pacification?
Can nature ever truly be legislated away, or is it just waiting for the concrete to crack?
That is the ultimate question.
It really is. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive. As a quick reminder, please hit that like and subscribe button right now so we can keep bringing you these massive breakdowns.
We appreciate the support.
And if you want to explore these explosive, thought-provoking arguments firsthand, if you want to understand the exact mechanisms of reclaiming your physical sovereignty, you need to check Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy Are You Chicken? Roosters will rule the roost in recreating Western civilization.
It's definitely a read that will stay with you.
And don't forget to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack for more of his insights. We'll see you next time.